We've tested Zigs before, but now it's gone super! What's up YouTube, I'm J-Rod at BLACKEST, and today we are taking a look at the Kuretake Zig Cartoonist Super Black Ink 60. Now if you guys are familiar with the channel, we have taken a look at their normal Zig Cartoonist Black Ink 60, and I absolutely love this ink. I thought it was a great ink for the price. It could do a lot. It was alcohol mark proof, it was waterproof, it had great finish, worked great with dip pen and brush. So when I found out they actually make a super black version, I had to give it a shot, and I'm really curious to see what the differences are between the two. They are about the same price, this one just being $2 more, selling for $8.99, sometimes up to $12.99 depending on the day. That's one kind of annoyance about these ink prices do fluctuate. I've seen this as low as $3 and as high as $12. But both inks are waterproof and alcohol marker proof, at least according to the listing. Now opening up the packaging, first off I gotta say I actually like how this comes in a little box. This one actually didn't come in a box, it just came wrapped in a little piece of plastic. But opening up the box, you could take a look at the actual inkwell itself, which actually looks the exact same as the normal inkwell. However, all the text is in Japanese, which means that we can't read it because I don't read Japanese. But checking the listing on Amazon, it does pretty much state everything that this ink does. In fact, I actually find it funny they actually list the English design of the packaging instead of the Japanese one online, so it has a little bit of gold on it, which I kind of wish this one had. And then one detail I absolutely love about these inkwells, that if you open them up, first off, they do not have a little seal, so do be careful, they could actually spill on you in shipping. I have not had that happen, but it is something that could definitely be a concern. And these little caps have a little indentation here and here, so you can actually use them to rest your brushes on, which is such a nice little detail. They did not have to do that, but they did. But now that we've opened up, taking a look at the packaging and taking a look at the bottle, let's go ahead and test it out in our Batman sketchbook. I like that. This ink is just so smooth, and that's one thing I have to say is that I've always been impressed by the quality of this ink, and the Super Black does not disappoint. Very strong lines, very smooth. And now this paper, the thing is that I love the Batman sketchbook. It's kind of a bit of a little tradition here on the channel, but the paper itself is not the best for inking. It tends to oftentimes lead to bleeding, where if I use a different paper that wouldn't be the case. But here, no, there's no bleeding, and that's one way you could tell good quality inks is if there's bleeding when you actually use it on non-good inking paper, and here, none of that bleeding. Now of course this is our dip pen. I suspected that it would work well, so let's go ahead and get a quick dip with our actual quill nib, and we're gonna go in there. Yeah, I like that. I like that. We're able to get these strong lines. One thing I'm actually going to do that I didn't do last time, and I think it's going to be interesting, is I do have a special dip pen. I don't know if I've shown it that much on the channel before, but it actually is specially designed to take both dip pen heads. So it can actually take dip pens and quill nibs, and it has this really kind of weird brush I want to use. So let's go ahead and give it a quick test. It also has a guard, so it's actually able to hold more ink. Ooh, that works really well. I like that. Alright, now we're going to use it with a brush real quick. Now this is a cheap Dollar Tree brush. I'll save our fancy brush for the illustration, but I just love how this ink goes down. It's so smooth. Really curious to see what the differences are between this and the Super Black, because right now it feels the same. I really don't feel any difference between the two inks. So let's go ahead and do our normal one right here. This one's not as smooth. And then putting it down, honestly, again, it feels the same. Obviously this one still hasn't had time to dry yet, but they do feel similar. In fact, I'm actually going to take the normal one and just kind of go over this one like that. Now after 15 minutes, these two inks have completely dried, and I have to say that there actually is a difference between the two, but it's very subtle. I've noticed that when their normal black ink dries, it has a slight texture to it, very slight, and it's not as matte black as the actual Super one. The Super one doesn't have as much as a texture, and it also is slightly more matte than the other. Now this is of course very difficult to communicate on camera. I tried messing with the settings to really try and make it as close as I could, but it just didn't look good. But in person, it's actually apparent. Not very apparent, but it is noticeable. Now for me, I don't think that slightly more matte and slightly less texture is worth the extra money that the Super asked for. However, we're only going to find this out if we actually do our illustration. And today's illustration is, of course, of wrath. Now, doing an illustration is how we put the ink to the ultimate test. I will only be allowing myself to use the Zig Cartoonist Super Black ink. As my black, my grays, I'll be using a dip pen, quill nib brushes, all my normal inking technique. I will, however, allow myself to, of course, use some type of white ink. That way I can go in and fix mistakes or add in back areas of white to the piece. And since a huge selling point about this ink is actually the fact that it's alcohol marker proof, we'll be using a couple of alcohol markers to help make the piece just a little bit extra. So with all that said, and a composition inspired by a piece of spot iron, which unfortunately I could not find the original piece that inspired this one, but I still wanted to mention it and try to give proper credit to the original artist, we'll be making this piece come alive. So let's go ahead and roll that super time lapse. Inking this piece was incredibly enjoyable, and I knew from minute one that was going to be the case here, as I love the original version so much and enjoyed my entire inking experience. And here was no different. The only difference was I did take my time a little bit more than last time I actually used their ink, and that's because this was the actual first piece I inked today, as I tried to film 3 videos on my filming days, just a little behind the scenes info for you there, and I just simply decided that this would be my warm-up, and I would just take my time and just enjoy the entire process. So it did take longer than it probably should have, but again, I just enjoyed the entire experience and decided to just take it easy on this one. After I did all my line work, I waited for it to dry, and when I felt like it was dry enough, and usually this ink takes about 15 to 20 minutes to dry, I ended up going in with my brush, and I mostly focused on my small little 0 round brush from Winsor & Newton. Just kind of went in and did my work. I did use some of my bigger brushes later on, but I found that with the way this piece was actually lit and the line work was done, that smaller brush would have been more beneficial. So I did almost all of my inking of Wrath and the figure with those brushes, and then started for the background, for the wings and some larger areas, incorporating my larger brushes. I really did enjoy my overall experience with this ink, and in fact I actually really enjoy going in and doing my little splatter effect, which is pretty much a trademark of my art at this point. It looked really good. Did lay on a little heavy in some areas. You can see some thicker blobs than I would have liked, but that's part of the process of inking. And since this ink is actually available to be used with alcohol markers, I just kind of went in and not only just colored Wrath red, which of course I actually used a few different markers to get just a little tonal difference. Again, his suit is meant to be like this liquid armor, so there's not a lot of shading across, actually really more just kind of in that little color difference. Just added little shades here and there, and then I actually took some gray markers and went in to add to that little gray wash effect that I did for the smoke. I was actually debating putting in some lightning or some stars behind him. I decided not to, as that would be too heavy on the white ink. Maybe if we actually do a review of the Zig Cartoonist white ink, we could actually go back and do it to this piece. But overall, I'm happy with what I had. I'm really happy with how the piece came out overall, and I'm sure you guys will. So let's go ahead and take a look at it in its finished glory. And we're done, guys. Absolutely love how this piece came out. Easily in my top 10 favorite pieces of the year. I love how this ink worked really well with the coloring, and I really just enjoyed making this piece overall. Of course, I did pencil this about a year ago, so it's nice to see that pencils still really do hold up to my modern sensibility with anatomy. And if you guys like it, it is available on my Artstation account for a $1 digital download. It really does help the channel out, plus you get an awesome desktop background. But putting the piece aside, let's talk about the ink itself. I have to say that while I really do like this Zig Cartoonist or Kuretake, I really don't know like which is the actual name of the company and which is just like their brand, because it's kind of confusing how it has like those two kind of brand-like names. But overall, I do really like this ink. I think it is really good. However, and this is really important to keep in mind, is that when you actually compare it to just their normal black ink, I honestly think it's kind of superfluous. There's no real reason for this to exist, as it essentially does everything the black ink does, just slightly smoother, and on top of that, also just slightly more matte. There's really no big, huge difference. It doesn't come in a bigger container for less money. It's the same amount of ink for a little bit more. And overall, because of that, honestly, I really don't see the point in picking this up when you can actually just use their normal ink. I'm not saying this is bad at all. It's just that compared to a cheaper price and of the same quality, of the same product, virtually the same, I really don't see the need to pay that extra bit for that. And because of that, you know, I rated this thing pretty high. I'm actually going to rate this a 7 on my scale of 1 to 10, just because there is this option available, which is cheaper. It's going to help save you money, and the overall benefits that you are paying for really aren't that much worth for the extra money. I just don't think that it's really that big a deal. Now, if this thing was much darker, if it dried quicker, if you get maybe more for the same, instead maybe get like 3 fluid ounces instead of 2 for the same price, then maybe I could definitely see it. But overall, I'm just giving it the 7 because of this existing. If this didn't exist and this was actually just the ink itself, honestly, it'd probably get a 9 on my scale of 1 to 10. It's not perfect. I did notice that when I went in with my actual alcohol markers, there were 2 areas where I actually did manage to bleed the ink, which kind of sucked, but I think it's because because I just didn't give it enough time to dry. However, that was, you know, well over half an hour, so, you know, that's up to you. And I really did like the product. It's just, again, comparing it to this, really, this is superfluous. Just pick up their normal ink. It's just as good, it's cheaper, and you're gonna love it. But that's my opinion. I'd love to hear your guys' in the comment section down below. What do you guys think of the super black ink? Did you notice anything that I didn't? Because really, virtually the same ink, just slightly better, but in my opinion, not worth the money. But again, I'd love to hear you guys' in the comment section down below. What do you think of the ink itself and the piece? Areas you think that I can improve on? All that fun, normal YouTube jazz. You know, subscribe to the channel for more art and animation-based content. And remember, I'm J.Rod, BATTLEBRAWLERproductions. I draw power in my own soul.